Welcome to Choose People Love Pets. Today I am joined by Dr. Lucette Beall, a veterinarian, entrepreneur, and author, whose life has been shaped by extraordinary challenges. From cancer and divorce to rebuilding her business, what makes this conversation so powerful isn't just what she went through, it's how she learned to think differently because of it. We talk about why so many of us default to negative self-talk, how that keeps us stuck, and what it actually takes to shift it. Because the truth is, the biggest thing holding us back isn't what's happening around us. It's the narratives we're running inside our own minds. If you're ready to take back control of your mindset and your life, this one's for you. I'm your host, Dr. Brianna Armstrong, and this is Choose People, Love Pets. Dr. Lucette, I would love to start this pod by asking you, what is the mission that you are on and why is it important to you?
Ooh, now you're going to make me get emotional right off the bat. Honestly, the mission I'm on at this point is I really want people to know that everything you need to create your extraordinary life is inside you. One, it's there, but a lot of times we've lost access to it. We don't even know what it is anymore. So we got to go back and find it, and we got to learn to trust ourselves again. And we got to believe that the dream that's in our heart is meant for us and that there's a path, there's a way, because people will tell you there's not. And they're not trying to be mean. It's just that we've been taught, society teaches, our brain works that way, that's safety. But safety isn't where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to thrive. We're supposed to, live an incredible, exuberant, and sometimes challenging, but the thing is that we're taught that the challenge is, oh, you can't do that. That's too challenging. Oh, you shouldn't do that. That's not safe. And then what you feel inside, you start to lose yourself in that space forever, if you're not careful. And one of the things that brought that home for me, and this is where I said I'd get a little emotional, is, one of the most challenging things I experienced and one of the things that really changed my viewpoint and my purpose was stepping out of my practice to help my brother after he had, been put in a state mental hospital after suffering a severe traumatic brain injury and then in the aftermath of that. And everyone told me not to step out and help him, that I would lose everything. And I did come close. But I wouldn't have come as close as I did if I would have understood from the beginning that when I had that passion in me and I knew that I was supposed to step out and help him, that everything I needed to succeed at doing that was available to me. Instead, I got tangled up in what everybody else said. No, you can't do that. No, you're going to lose. And I started feeling, I never doubted that I should step out. I just felt like I was a loser because it was so hard. And in that space, I was blocking the opportunity for the things to come to me. But the real thing is, if I hadn't followed that passion, if I had listened to what everybody else said, which is what we tend to do because of what unfolded, and because we don't know what I now know, I would have to live with the fact that he lived in a mental hospital for the last 10 years of his life. And I don't have to live with that because I stepped out and gave him the best chances that I could, gave him the best life that I could, and made it through and learned a lot of things that I would not have learned had I not, had the courage to do that. But at the same time, those 3 difficult years would not have been nearly as hard if I knew then what I know now. And that's why it's my passion to share that with others.
What do you know now exactly?
Gosh, it's huge. But, it is. That's why I teach a whole method around it. And that is because it's how to reconnect. It's how to find yourself on the inside, how to know who you really are. Because we get mixed up. We're taught by society to live from the outside in, meaning living up to others' expectations and pleasing others. And, it starts when you're young, even if you have parents not teaching you that. And a lot of us in my age category, that's all they knew, right? They're doing the best they can with the knowledge and tools they had. But I learned very early on that I was responsible for other people's emotions, actions, and choices. When I was little, when you go back
Who told you that?
Hear the stories, that's the way my parents operated. And I'm sure that's what they learned, right? And it's still so much there in society because you're pleasing your teachers, you're pleasing you're following the rules, whether that's at church or at school or in your job. And
now there's social media.
Yeah. And people are very willing to say you should have done this or you shouldn't have done that, and then we do it to ourselves. But we learn it really young, and you lose who you are in all of that. You don't really know, and you don't trust yourself, and you don't know how to connect just you and God, source energy, and that be your first lane. right? We tend to connect through other people, whether it's our pastor or our parents or our spouse. And we don't even realize that we're doing that we're not connecting and knowing who we are first and believing in ourselves, in our mission, or whatever it is we're called to do. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're called to do something, it's just going to be easy if it's your right path. But
Right.
you have to know so that you can hold on to that belief, and and doors will open. You will find your way if you hold on to that and trust and believe it. But we just are taught to doubt and to look for others for who we are. And you can't find your way that way. It gets complicated and difficult. And most of us get tangled up in trying to please a whole bunch of people around you, at work, at home, family, parents, children, friends, and living up to others' expectations and lose sight of really lining up with who we are first. And honestly, when we do it right, you can be so much more compassionate, because if I walk into work and I have an employee and she's slamming things around and she's in a bad space, if I think that her being in that space is ruining my day, I'm not very compassionate. If I know that I am 100% responsible for my day and that I can choose to have a good day regardless of what's going on around me, now I can be compassionate.
Gosh, that's powerful. Yeah.
Right? And that's
Yeah.
what I mean by lining up with yourself first and taking 100% responsibility for yourself, but 0% responsibility for others. So that I say that, and yet that doesn't mean you don't help my brother or help, but it means you know where you stop and they start. You know
Yeah.
how much is yours that you can do and how much you can't do because you can't change them.
What were people telling you? Like, why were they saying you shouldn't help your brother? And then what'd you feel in your gut? And how was that
So
different?
they really were looking, in their opinion, looking out for me, because I really wasn't in a position financially to step out of my business completely.
And
But
this was
he was
your
in a space,
veterinary hospital that you owned and ran and was successful. Okay.
and I had built it to a 2-doctor practice, but a 2-doctor practice can't suddenly go to a 1-doctor practice and be in the same space. And especially not when it's not the primary doctor that's been there that people have been coming to for years, right? And so the issue was they were afraid I would lose my business. I would lose everything. And because he was in a space where I couldn't just bring him home and go to work every day. He couldn't be left home unattended at that point. And there was nobody else to help him. And I knew he was still inside there. And the state mental hospital is a horrible place to be. And in my heart of hearts, I just couldn't leave him there. And, I borrowed money from his boss, because his boss was a very good man and had hoped that my brother would recover. He'd been paying his salary for 2 years, hoping that he could get back to the space where he could work for him. And I borrowed a lot of money from him. I borrowed $200,000 from him.
Wow.
And it took me 10 years to pay it back.
Wow.
But I did. They weren't wrong as far as the difficulty. Here's the thing, though. If I had understood what I know now, which if I had gone into it knowing, if I felt that way in my heart and I knew that's what I was supposed to do, there would be a way. Not necessarily easy. And if I had just stayed in that space of believing there's always a solution, there's a way to do this, there's a way to work this out. And if that had been my focus and not getting into overwhelm, then it wouldn't have got as hard as it did. And I know that because for 3 years after I stepped out to help him, I struggled financially. I got back to the clinic. It was over a year before I could be back in the clinic full time.
Okay.
And by that point, it was down to a 1-doctor practice again. And there was a lot. There was debt. There was payroll taxes that didn't get paid. There were a lot of things. That 3 years of struggle, when I got up one day and I was like, okay, it's getting worse. It's not getting better. I'm working really hard. I'm working 6 days a week. I have great clients, but we're not making progress on getting out of debt. And some of the things I had done out of that working harder really was like punishing myself, because not intentionally, but taking on the books myself, thinking that would save money. Well, in all honesty, you make more money as a doctor than you do doing the books, right?
Yeah.
But you lose track of that when you're looking at the stack of bills and you're just trying to figure out how to whittle them down. And in that space where I was more beating myself up, those thoughts weren't coming in. And so when I sat down and said, okay, what are you going to do? Are you willing to go bankrupt? Because you're just slowly getting more in debt and the business is there, but you're not making progress on getting in a financially stable again.
How did you have that conversation with yourself? Like, I feel like getting to the point where, like, you're in that moment where you're like, can I even come out of this? And still being able to think about potential solutions and, like, how you're gonna, like, walk me through that. Because I feel like
Well, the thing is,
veterinarians
I
and their,
felt like at this point I had to make a decision. Was I going to
yeah,
go bankrupt? And if I wasn't going to bankrupt, well, and I really, my ethics, my inside of me just couldn't just sign on the dotted line and decide to go bankrupt. Because I felt like even the suppliers and credit cards, I mean, they're believing in you. It doesn't feel right I didn't even do the thing where you combine the credit cards and do the lower interest rate because I was like, you know what? They loaned me the money and I know that, once I made up my mind, I ethically, and I wasn't gonna, his boss had loaned me that money, and whether he's wealthy or not, he didn't have to do that. And my
right.
brother would still be in the mental hospital without help. And so I didn't want to walk away from any of that. And I think the difference is before that, you're praying and you're asking for help, but you're coming from a place of feeling bad about yourself. And so what happens is when you're beating, and this is a lesson I got to learn from this, when you're beating yourself up, when you're frustrated and overwhelmed, basically your reticular activating system is looking for proof of what you're telling yourself. So when you are telling yourself things like, I stink, this is all my fault, or your reticular activating system's looking for proof of that. So it's not filtering for solutions and it's keeping your cerebral cortex shut down. And so when I made a decision that I just could not go bankrupt, I wasn't okay with that, then I understood that I had to make that decision every single day and that I had to do something different because what I was doing was absolutely not working. I went back to some of what I'd learned when I went through cancer as a single parent. And I started a morning routine and I got up every single day with the goal to get in the most positive space I could and to meditate, even if it was only for 5 minutes. The purpose of meditation is to shut out all that noise for a few minutes so you can connect with your source, your higher power, God, whatever you want to say that is. But when that chatter completely blocks it. And so, I'd feel really good and I'd get to work and walk in the door and then creditors are calling and there's another challenge, But the
Yeah.
thing is that at first it didn't feel like things were changing, but I was determined at that point. I made up my mind and I made that decision every single day. And even if challenges were big enough that I didn't sleep at night, I got up and got in that chair instead of trying to get another little nap because I realized that that was more important than anything else. And if I didn't sleep one night and I got in the chair, got myself in a good place, went to work, I would be able to sleep the next night. What had happened in those 3 years is I started coming in the clinic, noticing all the problems, noticing everything that was going wrong, which again keeps you stuck because your reticular activating system looks for proof of that. Your cortisol's through the roof. Your serotonin and oxytocin. And I wasn't taking vacations. I wasn't spending a lot of time with people. I think part of it, if you look back, I was probably a little depressed. And also, I didn't feel good about myself. So I didn't feel worthy of showing up different places. And
Yeah.
I certainly didn't feel like I could have a vacation. And so I wasn't nurturing myself. And when I started having the morning routine every day, showing up to work. From that point of view, what happened is one of the things in my morning routine was appreciation. And I still use it. 3 things I appreciate in life, 3 things I appreciate in others, and 3 things I appreciate in myself. And I think the one we miss most of the time is the one, 3 things to appreciate in yourself. And that makes a big difference because you start to hear what you're really telling yourself.
Right.
And the other thing that happened was as I was doing the appreciation, it made me during the day, knowing I was going to do that the next morning, I'm appreciating in real time. And I'm saying to my staff, thank you for that, or that's a great idea, and so suddenly we're all more solution oriented instead of problem oriented. When we walk in the door and we see everything that's going wrong, we're in the problem oriented mode. And the problem is because of how our brain works and the reticular activating system works, when you're in the problem mode, you're telling your brain not to look for solution. It's looking for proof of the problem. And so once you start looking for things to appreciate, you're actually appreciating solutions. And it starts changing the chemicals in your brain. It starts changing what your loop is looking for. And so what happened was I literally went from struggling for 3 years and several $100,000 in debt to once I made that decision, within a year, I was almost out of debt.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so even though it felt slow at first, that's the power. And there were some crazy things that happened. So the other thing you have to know is when you decide to own it and believe in it, sometimes whenever you think everything's going great and then stuff falls apart, it's falling apart because some things have to fall away to get to the next level that you're already focusing on. For instance, when I was in that space, that negative space, I lost some of really good long-term employees because I was really hard to live with. When I look back, I'm like, they gently and diplomatically left, things had changed. Well, then I ended up with some employees that were problem focused, like in the same level or vibration where I was. So when I started changing, some of those people had to fall away, right? Because they weren't honest. There were things. And so, we had a moment in time where we lost like 3 people at once. All of them had to go, and we're like, holy moly. And it was at that stage that you had to be strong enough to keep believing and know that wasn't a bad thing. That was actually a positive thing.
It
And
really
again,
speaks to like how you show up. And like what you just said is that when you were in that more negative space, you kept your negative employees. And then when you were reframing things and getting into more positive space, you were like, oh, I need to let these people go. And it made room for people with the right attitudes.
Well, and then they actually showed up. Like I had no choice, but those things showed up because as I changed and the people that were coming in from that, it became clear.
When I hear you talking about how much you were enduring at that time, especially when you were in that kind of like rock bottom moment of I'm either going to go bankrupt or I need to turn the ship around and really like commit with what you're describing, the phone calls from the creditors and like the pressure and the amount of debt you were in, I think a lot of people today would just quit. Like they would just get into a really dark place and give up. Have you always been this resilient, or did you become that way? Tell me more about that. Because I just don't think a lot of people would react the way you did. And I'm curious where that is from.
I guess that's one of the things I want to share with people too, because you're never a failure and you never fail unless you stop trying, unless you give up. You can go to some really hard places and win as long as you don't give up. And I think that I would not have had the courage to step up for my brother if I hadn't been through cancer just days after my divorce was final with no child support and no paid sick days. Because that was
goosebumps. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was 15 months of cancer treatment. It was 5 surgeries. It was 6 rounds of chemotherapy. It was 7 weeks of daily radiation, which kind of got spread out a little bit because of weather, because it was in the winter. But every time I left the practice, we weren't making any money. And there was no other income except, and that was also, you're responsible for your employees, the practice as well, because you're paying them whether you're there or not. And I had to make some challenging decisions as far as cancer treatment too, to try to do the best I could for my child and for the work situation. And I had 5 surgeries because it took 4 times for them to get all of the cancer. They told me if they didn't get it that last time, it would be a double mastectomy. But a double mastectomy would have been a lot more time off work.
Oh my gosh.
And if I didn't have to do it to save my life, then it was better not to. You know what I'm saying? I was supposed to have the same outcome, whether it was a lumpectomy or a mastectomy, but they just had a hard time getting it all, and they got it all the last time. And that's been, let me think, 2011, 15 years now.
Wow.
This month.
Is that when your perspective changed when you went through? I mean, that's
well,
also
I think
sounds
that
like
the amount of resilience, because that was one of those things. I remember driving home after the diagnosis just because I was exhausted just getting through the divorce. And I found that lump 3 days after the divorce was final. And I was diagnosed with cancer within 2 weeks. And so I just really wanted to give up, but it wasn't an option.
Yeah,
I don't know how it would have been for me if I didn't have a child, because, that makes a difference in your determination not to give up,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I wanted to quit and it wasn't an option. So then it's like, all right, I got to figure this out. And literally one of the things I learned during that point in time was, what do you do when everything seems overwhelming? You narrow your focus down as small as you have to function. If it's down to what do I need to do in the next 5 minutes, then narrow it down to what do I need to do in the next 5 minutes and only focus on that. And then when you get that done, focus on the next thing. And that's one of the things I learned, because sometimes during chemo, you'd just be so exhausted and you still had to find a way to get up, get functional, get to work. And there were days that I didn't feel good at work, days when I sat in a chair and they brought the patients to me in the back because I just didn't have enough energy to walk in and out of all the exam rooms. But I was still really grateful to get to work, to get to have something I was passionate about that I loved that distracted me from how I felt. So I had people say to me, I feel really sorry for you because you have to work. And I'm like, well, I don't feel sorry for me for that, because I saw people who sat at home and then they noticed every single thing that felt bad and every little symptom. And that's not a good mental space to be in. So I was grateful that I could have a better day because I could focus on something else.
Yeah. I have, luckily, several friends and family that are cancer survivors. And it's pretty amazing the mindset shift that happens when you're faced with your mortality. And I can only imagine, fortunately, I've not had to undergo that myself, but I can only imagine the kind of transition that has and where you focus your attention afterwards. And you've gone through really extreme situations that lots of people luckily haven't had to experience. And a lot of this happened to you all at once, which is just mind-blowing. However, a lot of people are really struggling with the everyday struggles, that negative self-talk, the burnout, the feeling stuck. I kind of have two questions along these lines of trying to understand why we go there. And it almost like makes sense that you went there, right? Because it's like, look at the things that you were trialed with. And of course, but then I think about my day to day and when I give myself negative talk, and then I'm like ashamed that I would even go there for something so mundane. And so why do we default to this negative self-talk? I think I heard you say one time that 80% of our thoughts are like negative.
Well, 80%
thoughts.
of those repetitive thoughts. So our brains are actually lazy.
Mm.
So they go on autopilot to be more efficient, but it kills us. Those are the things that are keeping us tied down in less than wonderful lives, right? So if you have an argument with someone and then a similar thing comes up, your brain will go right down you saying and thinking the same things as the last argument. So you're participating without actually thinking. And their problem is that keeps you in the problem because it just keeps repeating. And in order to get to a solution, we actually have to get our brain in the game. That's what I call it, because it's not in the game when it's on autopilot, right?
Why do we do that?
It's, again, because that's how our brain is wired, and it's supposed to keep you safe. Like way back in the Neanderthal age, if you saw something that was dangerous, then from then on you would recognize that. But it's not real helpful in today's society. You see what I'm saying? Like if you could recognize a danger quicker in that point in time, you have a better chance of living. But it's not particularly useful now in a lot of ways. I mean, it does. It can be useful in the sense that your brain is processing so much stuff. So in order to do that, that's why there's the autopilot thoughts. What I wonder is, they teach us that up to 80% of them normally is negative. And I wonder if that's because the way society has gone for so long.
Is it
where we have so much
right.
Yeah, is there a lot of a cultural component in that we can change? Because I know we can change it when we choose to change it, but you have to be aware. Like one of the reasons I believe in doing appreciation on a regular basis, it changes that loop to look for solutions, and it raises your serotonin and your, depending on dopamine, if you're checking off lists and telling yourself, great job, oxytocin, if it's interacting with other people and you're thinking positive thoughts about that. And all of those chemicals are helpful for your cerebral cortex functioning, for more efficiency. And when we focus on solutions, our reticular activating system becomes more efficient in what it's filtering. So there's a lot. And you can do mind movies. That's really, really helpful as far as getting yourself to a space. Mind movies is when you want something, and you create a mind movie of you enjoying it, being there, whether it's with your clinic, whether it's a vacation, whether it's a home.
Is it like manifesting? Like what people talk about?
Yeah, but what it does is your brain does not know the difference between a really good mind movie. So you've got emotions in there and you're imagining it and the real thing. So what it does is it tells your reticular activating system to make that happen. Like it's real and it's going to happen, and it's looking for ways for that. And so it filters for those things. And so what happens is you start getting crazy. I mean, that's really what happened. Was I started having ideas, and then the staff started having ideas once I got to that space, realizing where we could save money. One of the things, I've been open on Saturdays. I realized I was losing money being open on Saturdays because when I went to every other week, we made just as much or more money every week that we were closed on Saturday as we did on the weeks we were open. And of course, you're paying overtime a lot on Saturdays. Yeah. Even the Saturdays that were busy, we still did just as well on the weeks that we were closed. And so those were ideas that I wasn't able to access when I was just beating myself up and trying to work harder.
Yeah.
But I think it's so ingrained in our society because people are, even as kids, you get punished, you get told you should do this. And shoulding is shoulding on yourself because it is criticizing the past, even if it was just today. I mean, recently I realized I was shoulding on myself every evening as an entrepreneur. And it makes you
What
feel
were you
bad.
telling yourself?
Just, I should have done this. I should have got this done. I didn't, you know what I'm saying? Like criticizing
Yeah.
instead of noticing what you did right. Well, that affects your brain chemicals. That affects your reticular activating system. That affects
my
your
gosh.
confidence and your motivation in the long run. So I decided that I was going to write a list every day of the things I was proud of myself for getting done to change that. Because just saying I'm not going to should on myself doesn't usually work because you've got this
Right.
pattern and your brain is doing it. You got to change the pattern. And as soon as I started doing that, 2 new opportunities came in. It's
Yeah, I do.
crazy and I think it's not that the opportunities aren't available when we're telling ourselves that. It's that when we see them, we're like, oh no, I can't take that on. I can't even get done what I'm doing now. In other words, that year that I went from several $100,000 in debt to almost out of debt was not different than the 3 years prior to it in terms of opportunities and availability. What was different was I saw them.
Your receptiveness to them. Yeah.
And a lot of times we'll even say stuff like that wasn't intended for me. God didn't intend that for me. And it has nothing to do with God and everything to do with we're blocking what's being offered to us by what we're telling ourselves.
What are the most common negative narratives that you see people trapped
Oh
in
my
with
gosh.
the work that you're
There's
doing?
so many. I don't even know how but we're all the time, we're criticizing. I mean, shoulding is one of the things we do all the time. We are never enough.
I do that to myself.
And women, I think, are way more, we're worse about it, but also
Yeah.
the expectations of what others expect of us. And then we allow that to be our expectations of ourselves that are unrealistic, that we're supposed to, do the majority of everything at home, work, in your business. And it's exhausting. And when we don't compliment ourselves, when we allow all of those shoulds and when we beat ourselves up and when we allow others to beat us up and we take it in as real, it's just, it's exhausting. And instead of showing up excited, you're just existing. And that's why so many people are existing in their daily lives. It's what we're telling ourselves. And so we feel like we can't take on more. And it has everything to do with what we have been taught and learned and taken in about how we're talking to ourselves, what we're saying. And it creates our reality. Like we're creating our reality, whether it's by default, which is default when it's all the negativity, or on purpose by choosing what we want to do, what we want to believe in, and then getting ourselves in that space to do it and receive it.
Yeah, I mean, we have one life. Like, why wouldn't you want to take control of that? Let's
But we
talk
don't
about
realize it's even available to us.
right.
That's the thing that breaks my heart. We
Interesting.
don't.
And is it because we're not exposed to it, or like no one's enlightened us, or like what? How do we?
Well, and we're struggling with the mundane, so we don't think we're worthy of anything more than that. So we just don't see ourselves as getting to be that.
How do you take that next step? Like if you're talking to someone that is it exposure? This is going to go to the world and be heard, and
well,
like
honestly, what you hope. So I honestly think that for most people, there has to be some sort of wake up call. And maybe they can get enough of it listening to somebody say, oh my gosh, if you can go through all of that and succeed, then, because, we got almost out of debt in a year. By the following year, because I sold my house that I had owned at the time to help my brother. I used the equity to help him. And so I didn't have anything except the clinic. And then here I was, in a position to lose it. And so I got almost out of debt that first year. In the second year, I saved up, had a big cash down payment. But the thing is, from a logical point of view, as a self-employed businesswoman, single, I should not have been able to buy that house by that point in time. Do you know what I'm saying? I was still paying off payroll taxes. The income was great and we had got out of debt, but you have to have a certain number of years usually. But there was just this feeling. I knew I had the money to make a down payment. I wanted to buy the house, which is this house that I was living in as a renter, but I was only the second person who ever lived in it. The person that I was renting from had bought this from the original owners. So it's a beautiful home, but something just kept telling me, because I was like, there's no way. When you let go of that voice and really work on connecting every day, your intuition and inspiration comes in. And when you learn to follow that, all kinds of good, crazy things come about. And you have to step into it because it's really easy to say, I'm not ready. But if the opportunity's there,
Yeah.
you're more ready than you know. And if you're brave enough to say yes, everything you need to make it happen will show up. When I got to a year and I was almost out of debt, all these crazy things started happening. My mother got really sick. My dad had late stage dementia, and they were still living on a ranch in Oklahoma, 500-acre ranch that was 2.5 hours from me. And I couldn't help, I'd offered for them to move here. My mom didn't want to leave the ranch. And I was limited in how much I could help them because I still had the business.
Right.
And so that story is nuts. And that was happening as I was just coming out of debt. And I just made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to go back to the place I'd already been. So I understood at that point. What I didn't understand, I think, with my brother is I needed to nurture myself, take care of myself, and trust and believe in myself when I stepped out, and then
Mm.
know that solutions would come in that space. By the time I got to the end of that year and I was almost out of debt, I knew enough that I was determined not to go back down that path. And so, my mother ended up dying in January of 2020. This was the time period where this was all going down. I knew that my mom was very hard-headed and determined. That's probably where I got some of that from. And she kept saying she wanted to die with her boots on. And I'm like, what exactly does that mean? She
Yeah.
didn't want to leave the ranch. Well, Daddy was far enough along with dementia. I just couldn't see how that was going to unfold. And what I
Mhm.
was brutally aware of was I was the only person who could help them. And, I had a lot going on myself. So I knew it was going to come down to a crisis because of my mom's pride and how she felt. And it
Uh-huh.
did. And then I had to figure out how to make sure that I was able to help her, but not go back down in the business. Right.
Right.
And so,
What
but
was the
literally,
crisis?
hmm?
You said it
Well,
you said you knew there was gonna be a crisis, and then there was
and there
one.
was. So her health started going downhill. She started being in and out of the little local hospital in Purcell, Oklahoma. And they would take my dad in and just put him in the room with her. And then when he got lost, they'd take him back to the room and they'd feed him, which was great, but it was scary because he would forget to
Right.
take his meds. They had a dog at home. I'd have no idea if the dog was getting fed, and Mom wasn't ready. And then she decided that she did need help and asked for it. And then I found a place. I was trying to find a place. This was between Thanksgiving and Christmas where they could both be, which is not easy, and especially not during the holidays, because they say when people go home for Thanksgiving, they realize the situation their parents are in, and then they start. And I found this awesome place that had room because Dad would be in memory care and Mom needed to be in higher care. She couldn't just be in assisted living at that point because she had these health issues that we didn't really know what all was going on. And from a doctor's point of view, her sodium kept dropping really low and they couldn't find the cause, dangerously low.
Wow.
So then she finally decided she stopped talking. She was in the hospital and she stopped answering any of my calls because she decided she didn't want to go instead of just
Oh my
telling me.
gosh.
I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And this was like Christmas Eve,
Oh my
literally.
gosh.
And so then we had a good conversation, but she still wasn't ready to go. And then Christmas Day, she's already feeling lousy again. She texts me, okay, I really do need help. Now I'm mad scrambling, trying to get him here before she's back in the hospital.
Mhm.
Well, then the morning that I was supposed to go up there, because I needed to be able to sign on the bank account. That was a whole nother ordeal for her because she had a hard time letting go of control. Like literally, I had to ask her, Mom, is there somebody else you trust more? Because if we don't get somebody on the bank accounts, it goes through probate and we can't take care of Dad if something happens to you. And she's like, no, it's not that. I just have a hard time letting go of control. And I'm like, well, I get that,
Mhm.
but we're kind of in a crisis now. So
Mhm.
literally, I went to work. I was supposed to do a couple of surgeries, see appointments, and then leave and go meet her at the bank in Purcell. And I got to work. I just had this, again, that instinct that I just had this gut level feeling that I needed to get out of there earlier. And one of the surgeries canceled. And I told everybody, move the appointments up. I need to get out of here. And as
Mm.
I was driving to Oklahoma, she called and said she thought she was too sick to go to the bank. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? Because once I get him to Texas, if I don't have signatures, I don't know how we're going to do this. So I just kept driving and I didn't know what was going to happen. I just felt like that was what I was supposed to do. And I had her nurse practitioner friend go check on her. She said she needed to go to the hospital. They're driving to the hospital, and the banker calls mom and ends up saying that I can go to the bank and sign on the paperwork while mom's at the hospital and then take it to her. And what literally, I was sitting in the bank office and mom's friends texting me, and the news isn't good. And I'm crying, but trying to keep it together and be as professional as possible, right? And freaking out because I have to get all this stuff done. It took forever. And then I have to take it to her to sign. And then I have to drop it back in the drop box. And then I have to go get my dad and the dog and take them back to Texas.
Oh my gosh.
While they're shipping mom to Oklahoma City because they decided that she needed to go to an ICU up there instead of in Purcell. And literally she was signing checks. I walked out after she signed the bank papers, and something told me when I was in the hospital parking lot to run back in and have her sign checks in case the paperwork didn't go through, because I needed to be able to put my dad in the memory care, and there's no way he was going to be able to function at my house. And so I ran back in there, and she literally was signing the checks as they're loading her on the ambulance.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'm driving to Texas. That drive to Texas, that was the first time that my dad didn't know who I was. He literally thought I was his sister. So I'm driving back to Texas. He thinks I'm his sister, and my mom is in Oklahoma City in ICU by herself because I can't be with her because I have to take care of him. And so, and then she passed away. Then we had her whole estate, all kinds of crazy things happened. And I just kept having to, hold on to trust. Yeah. Because I was literally, by March, we were in shutdown, and I was able to sell their place. I had somebody that was supposedly a friend of my parents try to take advantage of me and have me auction off the place with no reserve and no appraisal.
Oh my God.
Like literally take me out in a truck and try to convince me to do that. This guy had been grooming my parents for years, and they thought he was a good friend. And this was transpiring. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I was so mad. I guess he didn't know how much of my mother I had in me at that point.
Wow.
Because there were people in the house helping us sort. And I literally, this is how much I had come to learn. I knew enough to know that I didn't tell anybody in that house when I went back in what had transpired. Even as upset as I was, I told no one, because they're there to help me. And if I go in and I start talking about this guy and what all happened, now they got to decide, is he right or I'm right, or what's the real story? And then it feels heavier than it already did to help me, right? And so I just walked back in the door. I just stopped for a moment, put my trust back in God, the universe, that everything would work out, walked in that door and focused on appreciating everyone that was there. And then I got a sign later that day that I knew.
What was it?
I knew. So like I was working, it was after everybody had left, and I was working in the spare bedroom. My mom, we used to jokingly say she was a hoarder with a housekeeper. She had a lot of stuff. And it took a lot to just try to find the majority of the things that we would want. And I was sorting through the spare bedroom, and all of a sudden there was this thud, and then there was another thud, and I looked up, and a female cardinal was hitting that window. And my mother loved birds and cardinals and bluebirds. And I raced around and went out the kitchen door, and there was the male and female just were sitting in that tree looking at me. And I felt like it was, a sign from mom and God. It's okay. Everything's going to be all right.
You've been practicing this mindset. This is like a year to 2 years out when you have changed the way you're thinking and the way you're moving in life. Were there times though where you were like, the universe is really ragging on me? Like, this is a lot. Like,
Yes.
What the hell?
Yes.
And how did you get back to trusting?
Because I learned through all of it that honestly we create it. So it's not so much the universe as the space I had been in. And yes, I can't control what happens to, say, my brother or my parents, but the reason it had been so exhausting and heavy for so long is because I didn't know where I stopped and other people started. It
What
took
do you
me
mean
a
by
lot.
that?
One of the things that is so important to regaining the strength and the joy and the ability to create your own life is understanding that you're 100% responsible for you, but you're 0% responsible for others, any others, not even your children. That doesn't mean you don't love them. That doesn't mean you don't support them. But we are taught the way I was taught and the way many of us are taught. And even if we learn better boundaries at home, life encroaches on that because we are taught that we should do this or we should do that, or we're supposed to please our teacher, or we're supposed to please our coaches, or And so we're not looking at taking care of ourselves first and then going out from that. We think that our happiness lies in helping others. And I had that to a huge degree. And so a lot of the things, I mean, I really think the cancer happened because I stayed in a really tough marriage for a very long time, thinking that was the right thing to do. And it wasn't. And my needs and wants were non-existent. I would do a few little things, like I might, have girlfriends that I maybe, did some things with, but not, I really didn't, and I built a practice, but I didn't create a huge vision for that practice and then go after that every single day, and that's what a lot of us do, right? We create by default because we don't understand the power that we actually have in ourselves. And we give our power away to other people by thinking we have to make them happy or we have to do things to please them before we can acknowledge ourselves. And it really has to be the other way around. We're taught that it's selfish to put yourself first. But honestly, if you don't put yourself first, you have nothing to give. Just like that example I said about if somebody else is having a bad day and you think that's affecting your day, you're not going to be very compassionate to them. If you are completely anchored in that you are responsible for your day and your emotions, regardless of what anybody else says or does. And that doesn't mean you never get mad, but if somebody says something that makes you mad, then your goal is, how do I deal with this in a way that I'm not still carrying it? Right?
Yeah, you're
That it
taking care
doesn't
of
own my
yourself.
day. It
Yes.
teaches you something. And if you stay in the solution mode, it's either if you're mad at them and it's your spouse, how can we work through this issue in a way that respects both of us? Like we treat each of us as a special, important being. And how do we find a way through that instead of repeating that same argument over and over again, which is what we do a lot. I mean, not necessarily. It is.
It
Like
is.
I was doing a workshop for
Uh-huh.
teachers for the school. And so we were talking about everyday things that we let really take us out of our zone. And I said, what are some things that irritate you on a regular basis? And one woman said that her husband not putting the trash liner in the trash after he takes the trash out, because inevitably at some point she throws something in there that needs to be cleaned up and there's no,
Yeah.
liner in there.
God, that's so
And
real.
right. And that's why I tell that story, because
Yeah.
it's an opportunity for us to understand that those little things do make a big difference. And that, how long had that been going on? 25 years. So that's an example of that's a simple example of how we repeat problems. And luckily, they have a pretty strong marriage, but those things do erode. They affect a whole evening at times, because that may have happened in the morning, but you threw the thing in the trash in the evening. Your husband comes around the corner. Now you're mad. At this point, he has no idea what you're mad about. You have a fight. Dinner's not so great. You know what I mean? It just ruined a day that it didn't have to if you got into a problem-solving mode. And it's not necessarily going to get solved on the first pass. Same thing for ourselves. When we are beating ourselves up, we're actually doing the exact same thing to ourselves, because we're shutting down our cerebral cortex. We're not giving our brain a solution for the next time. And that's what happens with shooting on yourself. You're not coming up with a solution to do it differently. You're just beating yourself up.
Just
So you're
shaming
just
yourself.
yeah, and so you're affecting the chemicals in your brain, you're affecting your solution ability, and those things add up to how much you're going to go after bigger things. They do. And so we have to learn to catch them. And then one of the biggest ways to notice it is noticing how you're feeling. Because if you're not feeling good, there's something you're telling yourself or something you're hanging on to. So our feelings are supposed to be indicators. We're not supposed to live in anger or stress or anxiety. There's supposed to be aha moments for us to figure out what solution we need to come up with so we're not living in that space.
Yeah.
And we have become accustomed to living in those spaces and accepting that as normal.
So I want to talk about your framework of how to get out of this normalcy for living in these scenarios that we've created for ourselves. Your framework, reverse, reframe, and rebuild. I'm assuming, tell me how that was born. And then let's dive into that framework. And if you were talking to someone that is stuck in their own head right now, how would you explain to them to go through the framework?
Well, so with reverse, it's a matter of so much of what we've been taught, like, for instance, talking mean to yourself. We take that as normal, right? And so we want to reverse thinking that's normal, but the thing is, you can't change what you don't know. So there's a lot of different ways for us to start recognizing it. The easiest one is appreciation. Because if you start making an effort to appreciate yourself, and for a lot of people, this is really hard. I even had a client that had to come down to saying, because if she tried to tell herself, what do I appreciate? She would like be sarcastic about it. Well, of course I should appreciate that, which keeps us in the wrong brain chemical situation, right? Because that keeps your
Uh-huh.
cortisol elevated because you're kind of making fun of yourself for even choosing to
Uh,
appreciate. So she had to go to what do I love in order to allow herself to let in appreciation. And I've had multiple clients that the hardest thing, it's not hard for them to appreciate others. It's not hard for them to find things to appreciate in life. And those things help. But the most important tool to changing what we're telling ourselves and getting to the point where you can take 100% responsibility is learning to appreciate yourself. And so that's part of reverse, because that's part of what we have to do. Because when we don't appreciate ourselves, we don't believe we're worthy of anything more. So we won't even entertain that thought. Isn't that tough to think about? And we don't realize that we're doing it to ourselves. That more than, sure, we let outside people tell us stuff, but it's not really what they're telling us. For instance, in those 3 years, my mother was very against me stepping out to help my brother. And so, when I was struggling, she was critical. But if I'd have understood in a huge way, she loved me and she was doing the best she could, I can own that, but not take in and own the criticism. I can still believe that if I was meant to do this, all the tools are available to me, every answer for every problem, there's a solution, but it still comes back down to we have to learn how to catch what we're saying to ourselves and become aware of it. Because I don't know about you, but I talked so mean to myself for so long, I didn't even know what I was telling myself. And it still happens. It's not like you can get a degree in it, like
yeah.
your college degree, and now it'll never happen again. And it's a constant paying
Work in
attention,
progress. Yeah.
awareness. And we've become so used to feeling bad that we don't recognize that's a signal, that it's really a signal for us to figure out what's going on so that we can adjust that. We've taken in something that it's almost like a disconnection from your true self
Mm.
and we let other people get in the way of that. Go
What's
ahead.
a simple first step that someone can take if they're in this lack of appreciation mode? They're trying to figure out, like, they've been in a rut and they're stuck in their own head. We're trying to reframe. And what I just heard you say is that some people are like, don't even realize that they're doing it to themselves and they're just like laughing it off. So, how do you, if I'm not
I
sure
mean,
if
the
that's
first
me?
thing you have to do is you have to want it, because nobody can do it for you.
Mm.
So you do have to get to some sort of space where you're like, I want more than this. I don't like the fact that I'm stressed and anxious all the time, or just don't feel great, or that my life is not what I really want it to be. Because again, no matter how much somebody else wants it for you, they can't do it for you. So,
Uh-huh.
and then you have to make enough of a commitment to change some things. But I try to keep it really simple. I think the most powerful thing you could do, and definitely the most powerful thing for me, was a morning routine.
Okay.
And I always highly recommend keep it short to begin with, because consistency is everything. Most people that have been doing it for a while will have a little bit longer morning routine, because you understand the power, how much time. So, for instance,
Give me an example of what that looks like. Yeah.
yeah. So what I usually have people do to start with, if they can, is meditate for like 5 minutes. You can start really short and then try to get to 10 minutes eventually, but it doesn't have to be long. You do not have to meditate for 30 minutes or an hour a day. And most people don't have that kind of time. A little bit goes a long way. And then I have them do the appreciation journal, because appreciation and the goal is not what you're grateful for. This is not, I'm grateful for this apartment. I hate this place. I hate my neighbors. Because that won't do it for the brain chemicals, right? It
Yes.
won't. And so that won't change where you're at. So if there's one thing you like in your apartment, like if you have one beautiful art piece or something that your child made, or one thing, that's what you want to focus on, the thing that makes you feel better, the thing that makes your heart sing. The goal is to get to that point. The goal with the morning routine is feel better, get yourself in a better place. And read something positive, something that really upset, and that I did was also like, if you're driving, listen to positive podcasts or audiobooks, do things, and eventually you've got to get yourself in the space with more people like that, one way or another. Most of the time, if you're in a negative space, you got a lot of people in your life that are in that space as well. And
Yes.
or a lot of people that, for instance, a lot of times when you talk about boundaries, when you go to set your boundaries, the reason you don't have any is because you were raised without boundaries. So that means you have a lot of people around you who don't have boundaries. That's one of the hardest things, right? And that's where you've got to have a morning routine, because if you just go plop willy-nilly into the day every day, those autopilot thoughts are too powerful if you don't get ahead of them. And why appreciation works so well is because it changes the brain chemicals. It lowers the cortisol. It changes what your reticular activating system is looking for. So that's why consistency is important. So I'm like, if you have 5 minutes to meditate and 5 minutes to write appreciation, do it.
Do it.
And if there's any way you can do a short amount at night, helpful too, because you dream about, and usually by the end of the day, you're kind of exhausted and you've carried all that on, and then it goes into your sleep, and you wake up already worrying, and now you got to get yourself back in the morning routine and get yourself in a better place. I learned it was worth it to get up a little extra early and spend more time on the morning routine and get in the best place possible before I faced the day. And then I was more resilient. And that's where the resilience comes in. You don't have resilience when you're beating yourself up all the time. You don't. And it's you doing it to yourself and not knowing that it's you. It's not everybody else. Because people are going to say, for the end of time, people are going to criticize, people are going to judge. Sometimes you're going to have people that you really love who don't really know the real you, who are judging you differently. And you got to get to enough of a place in your relationship. You've got to care enough about you to create a relationship with yourself that isn't dependent on other people's approval or opinions. Nobody, not your child, and that's where I'm really, really grateful for those tough experiences, because I've learned something I can share with others that not a lot of people have the opportunity to learn. We can't live in a vacuum, and we're not meant to live without others, but you can love the people that love you back and create an incredible life. And it doesn't have to be dependent on it being a certain specific person, like a spouse or a parent and you really can love, if you learn to love your family unconditionally, just the way they are, no matter how they're loving you back, love them, then everything you ever want or need is within your reach. But when we think we have to heal somebody or have them love us a certain way or see us a certain way, that's when it becomes conditional, and that's when it becomes really tough, because you think that you have to get them to see you a certain way before you're okay.
Yes.
And it has to be the other way around. You have to be okay. And then when they come around or don't come around, you're still okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think enough of us don't think about how important that relationship with ourself is.
And I think we're taught not to. I think that's one of the hardest things. I mean, literally, even in, say, a church situation, there's a lot of times where they're teaching you that your faith should go through somebody else, whether it's the preacher or and not always, but a lot of times it is, or go through rules. And your relationship has got to be just you and God, source energy, nobody else. And nobody, even the people that say they know you best, nobody knows you like you know you. Nobody can tell you really, truly what your passion or your path is, even if they think they can. And when you get to the point where you know that, you can be kind about it, which is great, because you're not, they're just doing their best. You don't have to be mad at them, but you got to line up with you.
Okay. So for our morning routine, I have meditation, appreciation, 5 minutes each, just as a starting point, and then listen or read something positive. And so I love that as like a simple morning framework to help. What I'm understanding is that the reverse part is getting aware that you're having those thoughts and then trying to shift that.
And how they're affecting you. Because right? Because until you own that, you think everybody else is doing it to you. The economy's bad. This person said this, and that's why I had a bad day. And, they said this and this at work, or this all happened. And, how we come. And the other thing we need to realize is that when we go and we talk about all of that, we're keeping ourselves stuck in the problem.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
And we do it because we want to be right. People want to be right more than they want to be healed. And the rightness keeps us stuck in the problem.
Man, that's a great quote.
Yeah. People want to be right more than they want to be healed. And they don't even realize that's what it actually is. Yeah. Like if you ask them that, they might not be able to tell you that. But when you watch their behavior, they'd rather go tell everybody else about this interaction with this person and how this person said this, this, and this, than actually think about how could I take responsibility for my part of the conversation and change the trajectory of how this is going.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like with a coworker or a family member right? And so that's but that's all we know. Everybody does it around us. So we've learned it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in any industry, you're gonna see
Mhm.
that, and so how do we swim against the grain of, like, what everybody else is doing?
All of us in different situations end up trying to prove we're right instead of, which is focusing on the problem instead of figuring out how there could be a solution and what that solution could be.
Yeah. Okay, so the reframe part of your framework, reverse, reframe, rebuild, tell me more about, like, the rest of this framework.
So you have to sometimes reframe as like a multi-step process. I'll give a simple example because it's one that a lot of people can relate to and it doesn't involve all the emotions that make it get complicated. But
Okay,
for instance, if someone learned early on that they're terrible at math, meaning, which really means a teacher told them that, a parent told them that, they were having a
grades.
hard time. And rather than being able to teach them in a way they could learn, the teacher said, well, you're not good at it or whatever. And then they carry that around. And of course, as long as you tell your brain you're not good at something or this is going to be hard or whatever it is, you aren't going to see a different solution. You're going to believe that. And because it just, your actions follow what your reticular activating system is looking for proof of. Your actions reinforce that because that's what you see, that's what you do. And then, so your actions follow that, which reinforces the belief, which reinforces the thought. And so if you've been telling yourself that for 20 years, but really you would have loved to have a career in a field that math was involved in, and maybe your parents told you couldn't, or maybe you just told yourself you couldn't, you're not going to be able to suddenly go, I'm great at math, and just write, I'm great at math, and overcome it. Because if you don't believe it, if you don't feel something inside that feels
Uh-huh.
good, you're not going to move the needle. It's kind of like saying, I want to make $1,000,000 and it doesn't feel real. $1,000,000 isn't going to appear if you just say that, right?
Right.
You have to put a number out there that's a stretch, but it's something you can believe that you could do. So if you don't believe in math, what you can say to yourself or anything else you want to imagine, what would my life look like if I could do math? Or what would my life look like if I could earn $1,000,000? Or if I could live in this neighborhood I want to live in? And you start imagining it. This is where we're talking about mind movies. What happens when you start to imagine it? And you can even journal it like imagining it, but you imagine it with emotions and what are you wearing and who are you with and who are you talking to and who's in the vision with you. And when you do that and then you actually do a mind movie, your brain, when you do it well, your brain doesn't know the difference. And that means getting excited, that means appreciation. So you got to know that you got to feel it. That's how you know if you're creating one that will work for you. And then what happens is crazy things happen, like you've been driving by the same place for years and all of a sudden you notice it says, adult education, adult math, or something comes up on the TV. I mean, I've gotten solutions from the craziest places once your reticular activating system is filtering for those
It's
things.
like noticing, it's like finally available to notice that stuff because you've primed it with the thoughts.
It's filtering millions and millions and millions of things every
Yes.
minute. And so we don't realize how much we're teaching. When we say, this economy is terrible and our business is not going to do well until that changes, then we
Uh-huh.
don't give our brain room to look for solutions. When we say, well, the economy's changed, so we got to come up with we got to figure out what we can do differently. How can we meet our clients where they are now? What could we come up with? And you operate from that space. It might take you 3 months to come up with something great, but if every single day that's the mode you're operating in,
The
things will
mantra.
show up.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that the rebuild part? Is like you're like,
First, you're reframing it so you can get to it. Yes. And then,
mm-hmm.
yes,
And
absolutely.
then is it like taking action on, I see the adult learning class for math, like I'm going to go do that. That's the
Yep, I'm gonna
rebuild.
look into that, and if that one wasn't right, another thing will come up. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
worry if the first thing doesn't come up because it will.
Uh-huh.
I started wanting this house and wanting to be able to buy it. And then all of a sudden I had the inspiration that I should contact this certain person. And his son worked for me. He was a banker. And I did, but I was thinking there's no way, and especially not a banker, because mortgages companies can usually do more than a banker. And I knew that, but he was sure he could. Well, in the end,
Right.
he took my folder with everything he had learned. He took it to a mortgage guy that he knew that was in the same building as his bank was, and told him everything that that he had found that needed to be, addressed to make it successful. And I was able to buy this house. Logically speaking, I shouldn't have been able to. And I bought it in August of 2020 when interest rates were really low
Yeah,
and
the
the
perfect time.
value
Yeah.
of it was, I mean, within 8 months, my house had gone up in
Doubled.
value tremendous amount,
Yeah.
So that gut instinct to go and do it then, even though logically I was like, there's no way they have to have 3 years of profit, and I don't have that, I
Yeah.
just came out of. So that's what I'm talking about. Things can happen, but you have to have you have to be in that space to follow that instinct even when you're thinking, wow, how's this gonna, you have to trust and believe. And I found that it was easier for me to do that when I was helping somebody else than it was to do it for myself. And that was something that I had to sit down and have a conversation with myself about too. I was like, it's funny what I can manifest and what I can create and what happens when I am helping somebody else. And what I had to own was I didn't feel worthy of doing it for myself.
If I'm trying to better myself and I'm trying to think critically about how I did something, how do I do that in a healthy way
You said, wow,
versus
you know what? That didn't work out the way I wanted it to. What could I do differently next time?
mm,
You speak to
yeah,
yourself like you would speak to a small child, or you want to speak to a small
or
child
your
anyway.
friend. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yes.
you become your best friend. And
Yeah.
you have to be willing to, so that's rebuild, okay? Is you start talking kindly to yourself. You catch when you're shooting on yourself or
Yeah.
worse, or you're being mean to yourself. And I think us as veterinarians, we have a huge propensity to do this because we have such a passion for high level medicine and taking great care of these pets, and we don't allow ourselves to be human. And here's the problem. When we do that, we're not as good as if we talk kindly to ourselves and evaluate what we could do differently from a kind standpoint of view, because now we've given our brain the tools to do it differently next time. And when we just beat up on ourselves, we've given our brain nothing to work with for the next time.
Yeah.
So
And
it's going to
also,
happen again.
yeah, and I think from the doctor perspective, I have seen doctors be so hard on themselves for a negative outcome and change the way they do medicine, even though their medicine was good. So
Yes.
instead of saying
Yeah.
that outcome was bad and really critically looking at, okay, look at the decisions I made, these made sense, right? They
Yeah.
punish themselves and they're like,
Yep.
it's because I made these really logical decisions that this happened. It's like,
Hmm.
no, like there's always going to be a positive and a negative outcome. And it is Russian roulette. Like you do not know which one you're going to get. You just have to make the best decisions you can. And that's how I see that play out when we're overly critical of ourselves. And
Yes.
we actually do worse medicine
Yes.
because now we've
Yes.
made a poor decision moving forward based on an outcome that we shouldn't have taken like that. Oh, I
Yes.
just shoulded myself. Look at
That
that.
it would be better if we talk to ourselves in a different way. That's exactly because
Yeah,
we're no longer um, evaluating it logically, and that's what we
right.
have to be able to do. And we're great at evaluating, being kind and evaluating others a lot of times, and terrible at being kind and evaluating ourselves. But that's also why we're so prone to suicide as a
Mhm,
profession.
mhm.
Because we don't just beat ourselves up, we take in as real what other people are beating us up for. And with social media, that can go to a high level. And to gain our resilience, we have to learn how to talk kindly to ourselves. It's one of
Yeah,
the reasons, I really like to be speaking in the schools as well as continuing education, because how we talk to ourselves is everything as far as being in a solution mode.
yeah,
And when we evaluate ourselves kindly, there's a difference between perfectionism and excellence. Excellence is not perfectionism. Perfectionism actually causes us to be worse because, again, when you operate in that perfectionist mindset, if you don't get a good outcome, no matter how good you did, you're going to criticize yourself, which sets you up to make worse decisions the next time.
mhm,
Whereas excellent means you are able to evaluate it. And there are times you're going to make mistakes, but you can't beat yourself up for it. You have to use it as an opportunity to learn something that will help the next patient. And
yeah,
you'll make a lot less mistakes when you operate from that space because you stay logical all the way through. Even when things are crappy with the patient, you're still logically thinking. When you have a tendency to beat yourself up when it's not going well, you start beating yourself up, which affects your ability to make good decisions and look for solutions.
yeah. I think someone hearing this might think, if I'm going to play devil's advocate, they might think like that sounds like, oh, not just don't beat yourself up. Like that sounds a lot easier said than done. And I think another thing that I could see people saying based on the conversation we've had so far is, if I just think positively and try to think appreciation and gratitude every time a challenge comes my way, that could sound a little bit like toxic positivity.
Which is not, so we want to be, so there is a difference. You
Yeah,
find the things you
let's
can
talk about it.
appreciate. Yeah, because
Yeah.
toxic positivity covers it up, and you can't fix something that you don't acknowledge. You can't, and what I mean by that is toxic positivity to me would be like, if we're talking about the trash can liner situation, would be
Yes.
like, okay, I'm just going to not be mad anymore. And you can't change how you feel. So
Right.
that's not a solution. You're going to have honest conversations and try some things. Maybe you can put a bunch of trash liners in the bottom of the barrel and talk him into, when he ties up the trash bag, he pulls the next one up, because now he doesn't lose track of it by the time he goes to the trash can and back. He's forgot about that. Or, or are you going to decide you'd rather carry out the trash? I mean, the thing you have to realize is asking him after 25 years to suddenly put the liner the way it's currently set up, wherever that liner is,
Yeah.
expecting that to change, and he has to change for you to be happy. So you have to decide, and it doesn't mean you can have a conversation, but you got to figure out how can you change something to feel better, however many times it takes to figure it out.
Right.
So
The way it's set up right now
appreciation,
is not working. And so
yeah,
something has to
right.
change.
But
Yeah.
sometimes to find a way to a solution, you do need to sit back and go, well, what are all the things I appreciate about him? Because right now I'm so focused on this that it's clouding my vision for everything else. And in the whole scheme of things, trash can liner versus,
That's so real too. Yeah, you can
right?
really get tunnel vision on like, God, I'm so mad right now just because of this one thing, and you forget.
Well, we do it to
there's-
ourselves.
Yeah, we do.
We do it to ourselves. So
We do.
we do. You know
We
what's so
do.
funny? So I used to have a temper, and it's mostly gone now. And I didn't realize it was really a lack of coping mechanisms, right? Because I didn't know where it came from. My parents had a temper. And so what's funny is when you get that mad about something, whatever it is, if it's me trying to find something in my kitchen cabinet and getting mad, right? As soon as you get in that space, or you can't find your car keys or their fob or whatever, as soon as you get in that space, your reticular activating system is completely in that loop of that problem. Right? Your cerebral cortex is completely shut down. For as long as you're in that space, you are not going to find it. And so what happened when I started doing this work is I'd get in that space. I remember one particular time I couldn't find the lid to a pot. And, I was feeling stress about other things. Obviously, that you can also go back and look at what all's going on that's causing me to like lose it over this, right? But as I'm losing it, I'm so mad. I'm just slamming things around. And there's this voice in the back of my head going, yeah, how's this working out for you? You found it yet? And it was that. Like I'm losing it here, and then there's this part of me going, yeah, how's this working out for you? It's sure going well, isn't it? And then I calmed down, partly because of the voice in my head, and then it was right there in front of me. The difference between appreciation and toxic positivity is I don't want you to appreciate something you don't appreciate. If you are in a difficult situation, or you look for the things you can appreciate to help your brain chemicals get in a place where you can problem solve. Because you have to understand that when you're in that really negative space, your cortisol is high, your brain is looping on the negative, and you can't find a solution from there.
Yeah.
So toxic positivity won't help, because it actually won't change that, because you won't believe it.
So you got to pick.
You'll
things
still
that
be
are-
in the same place. So the goal with appreciation is, if there's one thing in your whole life that you appreciate, maybe that's the only thing you can focus on right now. But as you focus on it, you'll start to see other things that you can appreciate. And it's simple things. I appreciate the way my bed feels, or I appreciate my cup of coffee in the morning, or I appreciate. So you look for little things, because it's changing the chemicals in the brain, and it's helping you get out of that negative loop. That's the difference
Yes.
between toxic positivity. That's why I said, when you do that, you can't be, I'm grateful for this apartment, but I hate this apartment. It's awful. The door's drafty, and the neighbors are horrible, and they play their, that won't get you where you need to go, because it's going to keep the cortisol high.
Right.
So you have to find that one little thing that you can appreciate and focus on feeling better, so you're changing the brain chemicals. Meditation also helps, because you stop all that negative talk, because usually when we've been in that loop for a while, that negative talk is rough. I mean,
Yeah,
that's why
it sounds
sometimes I
like
wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Cortisol would be
yeah,
so high, when some of the things
yeah.
were going down and changing employees and that, ugh, there were some times it was really tough. But I knew I had to get in the best space possible if I wanted to have a better outcome. And you
Right.
don't have to be perfect. You can be better, and it will allow your brain to find connection for solutions, and then the momentum gathers.
When I think about people that are in a rut and are depressed and just thinking really down on themselves and the situations that they're in, acknowledging that pain and trying to change your mindset about it, to me sounds really daunting. And when I think about how I would actually do that for myself, it would be a little bit of like forcing myself to reach for the things I appreciate and like just going through the motions of just trying to do like have those actions so that my brain chemicals follow. Is that my thought process about how that might look right? Is it a little bit of like forced action to then get the change?
I think it's more about making a decision.
Mm.
You can't get to the forced action without making a decision, and making a decision has a huge effect on your brain chemicals.
The
So
decision
becoming
being,
determined,
yeah,
I'm
I'm
not
making a
gonna
change.
not willing to live like this anymore. So if I can do 10 minutes in the morning, and then you got to start nurturing yourself. So the other
Mhm.
thing is if you're in that really bad place, you've got to find a way to, acknowledge things that help you feel a little bit better. And you have to be okay with a little bit better is okay. Don't, because that's the thing we do. We want instant results and we're going to beat ourselves up if we don't get it. Then you can't get there from there. What you're practicing is learning how to be kind to yourself. So
Yeah.
take a hot bath, read a book, go for a walk. Make a list of the things that you really enjoy and then try to do a little bit of those things wherever you can, to realizing that the goal is to feel a little bit better. And I think that sometimes in those places, that's where maybe you do need to, go to counseling or get on some antidepressants because the longer you've been depressed, the parts of the brain that create the dopamine and the positives can shrink if you've been depressed long enough and the cortisol's been high long enough. So
Mhm.
maybe you don't try to do it all yourself if you're in that space.
Mhm.
If you're just, you're in that space where you think, well, I can still make a decision, then you have to make that decision every day. But be kind to yourself. If you have a day where you didn't do as well, beating yourself up just sinks you further. And that's where we make the mistake. Instead, go, you know what? Today was I didn't do what I wanted to do, but that's okay. I still love myself and I know I'm worthy of more. So, what can I do right now to feel a little bit better? You can have people on your list to call to feel better, but it's got to be people that aren't beating you up.
Yes. No,
So,
that's
you
important.
have to when you make I call it a joy toolbox. And I it's the things that you need to when you're really struggling, what would make you feel better? I try to get outside. I try to get
Mhm.
outside, get a walk in the daylight cuz that really is positive for me. And I try to pay attention to what I'm telling myself. And I can be a person that can work and work and work, right? But you got to make sure you're nurturing yourself.
Mhm.
It's easy for me to get in that space as if that's nurturing, and it isn't all nurturing, Have to make a point to schedule to do something fun and make space for that. I mean, because right
Mhm.
now I have 2 businesses, I sold my practice, but I do relief work, ER relief work, and then also I do the speaking and the coaching, and I'm writing a book, and so it's really easy if I'm not careful to be working 7 days a week.
I wanted to ask you, if you are hearing this conversation and you're like, I can think of someone who needs a reframe and rebuild and they're stuck in that. What's your advice if there's someone in your life that you feel like needs to shift the way they're thinking and you don't know how to get them there? Like when you have conversations with them, it's just all negative and you're like just trying to get them to see that there could be solutions, but they don't want them. What's your advice for people with people in their lives like that?
Well, this comes back to 100% responsibility for yourself and 0% responsibility for others.
Oh,
So,
damn.
but I can tell you some things you can do, but it's different than what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So, you can't help them see it from the standpoint of you getting them to see that they need to go do something.
Uh-huh.
Your best shot at helping them is making sure you do your best to stay as aligned with you as possible, and that when you're with them, you are the best of you. You are a bright,
Mm.
shining light, and they're going to bring you down if you stay too much. And so you have to dart in and out so you keep yourself at that high level. Because if you go down in the pit with them, you can't help them. If you feel sorry for them, you can't help them. You have to actually vision them as if they're healed and whole and already where you would love to see them be able to get to. And you speak to them as if they're already in that space.
Wow. Why is that important?
Because again, you really can't help them. If you're in the if you're feeling sorry for them, you're seeing them as a victim. Anytime we're in victim mode, trust me, I've been there. And if we're in victim mode or overwhelmed, we are absolutely not connected or lined up. And when you see them as that, then you don't have anything to offer them because you're
Mm,
seeing them as needing help instead of seeing them as the beautiful person you really know they are and hope they could find a way to.
that's so powerful. I've literally never thought about it like that. And I
So
don't, yeah.
yeah, here's when you think about Jesus healing, really and truly, the way he healed was he didn't see the sickness. He saw who they were. And he said, go and tell no one, because when you start speaking of your illness again, you bring it back.
Mm,
Just like when we go and have we haven't say we have a difficult conversation and we go and tell everybody else about how this person was wrong and what they said, right? We're keeping ourselves in that space. You can keep yourself in your illness or in your depression or by your conversation. So we can only help them when we really truly see who they're capable of being, and treat them like they are already that person.
yeah. You know what I just told myself? I just told myself that I've been holding my friends back because I've been treating them like victims. And instead, I should think to myself, what an incredible tool that I now have that I can bring to the people in my life that I think this could be valuable to, right? Like anyway,
Love it. I love it.
yeah.
Well, here's the thing. We keep them in victimhood when we see them in victimhood,
Yeah, I
not
just never thought about
intentionally.
it like that.
And so here's the thing. They resist it because it feels like criticism when we're telling them to do something different. When we can love them 100% right where they are, whether they ever heal or not, then they don't feel judged. Then they
Mhm.
don't feel like they're not enough. We unintentionally are, by seeing them as a victim, continuing that, right? Because you just need to do this, this, and this, and you'll be okay. And if we give them the respect of their life as their path,
Mhm.
and our job is just to be and now sometimes when you're in that situation, you have to love people from a little further distance because sometimes they want to stay in that victim mode and they want you to assist them in that.
Right.
And your goal is never to assist that. Love them. But because they can become like a weight you're dragging around if you're not careful,
Mhm.
because they've decided they need you to be okay. And you're never helping them when they need you to be okay, because in order for them to be okay, they 100% have to understand that they're 100% responsible for them. So we're never assisting them when we're carrying them. Trust me, it took me many, 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 many years to understand this. And I carried a lot of people around at the expense of myself
I think we
before.
struggle with this as veterinary. I think everybody struggles with this, but I think specifically veterinary professionals.
I think the type of personality that is attracted to veterinary medicine, with the high level of achieve we have to have and the perfectionism almost that requires to get into vet school, plus the compassion to go into a profession where we're taught we're really not going to make the kind of income for the amount of education and expense. And also people who sometimes get along and communicate better with animals than people. So
Mhm.
we tend to be those people that have the blurred lines, that don't know where we stop and other people start. And that's exactly what I mean. When we feel sorry for people and think we need to help them, we don't know where we stop and they start.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Totally. No, it totally makes sense. It's something I've definitely been struggling with, like trying to figure out like where is the line and how much do I do? How much do I step back? And like I think this reframe of I love what you're saying about treating them like the people we know they can be and setting up boundaries of like how much time I'm willing to commit to being around those individuals is it's really helpful and not a way I've thought about it before.
Yeah. Sometimes we think if we could just get them to see this, and
Yeah.
that's where we get stuck. That
Yes.
becomes we're not helping them and we're exhausting ourselves. If
Mhm.
we walk away from time spent with a friend or time on the phone, and when we hang up the phone, we feel exhausted,
That's a
then
sign.
we're not
Yeah.
helping them and we're draining ourselves. So something I learned, I had someone in my life, close family member was very negative about other people. And, my first response was to try to get them to change, right? Don't talk negatively about those people. No, well, you can't change somebody else, right?
Uh-huh.
Then my next response was that I thought that I just had to sit and listen. I couldn't argue anymore. But the clue that I came to learn is when I come off the phone, I'd be absolutely exhausted and I'd feel guilty because it feels like I'm being a traitor to the person they're talking bad about, who is someone I love as well, if I'm
Uh-huh.
not saying anything and yet an argument doesn't change anything. And this is what I learned to do. I love you. I got to go. Bye. And don't answer if they call back. And one day I did that. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time at that point because I was like, okay, I love you and I want to talk to you. If you start talking negatively about somebody else, I'm done. I'm off. And
Uh-huh.
that way I'm not judging them. I'm not telling them to be different. And I'm saying I love you. So there's no reason for you to be mad at me, but I am not continuing the conversation as soon as it goes negative. And one day I said that and the other person said, oh, I didn't mean to be negative. And what I want you to understand was I did not fundamentally change the other person.
Yeah.
That person would talk negatively to other people, but she came to understand that if she wanted to have a conversation with me, it wasn't going to involve talking negatively about other people. And I was always going to get off the line if that happened. And I had to learn to change other things to set boundaries. Like I didn't spend the night at her house. I stayed in a hotel so that because if I stayed at the house, something was going to be said that would create a scene if I left, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it was my mom, and I love her. She's doing the best she could with the knowledge and tools she has, and she had a lot of good qualities. But, if I stayed there, then she's going to say something that would definitely cross my boundaries. But if I had, say, got up and left, then that's going to create this whole scene. Now my dad's going to be involved. What I learned is when I stayed in a hotel, it just didn't happen because she knew I could just say, hey, gotta go. It's the same
Yeah.
principle as the phone. So you have to find ways to set boundaries that don't involve changing the other person to be okay. And,
Yes.
my goal in that thing was I wanted to love her. I wanted to be in their lives. I just needed to do it in a healthy way for me because you can't have unhealthy boundaries with one person and expect you're going to be able to have healthy boundaries with somebody else. You either
Mm.
have them or you don't.
Yes. I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
What is a belief you had to let go of to become the person you are today?
Oh, gosh, there's so many, right?
Were there any ones that you feel like were the most influential?
I think one of the things that I still actually honestly work on from time to time is worthiness. Yeah, and I think the thing is that what I know for sure is there's no action there's nothing you could have ever done, nothing you could have ever said, nothing that makes you unworthy. I don't care if you're a murderer on death row, you're still worthy of God, the universe's love, and a life because the actions that we take that unintentionally hurt others no one ever gets up and says they're going to hurt others. They get up hurting so badly that
Uh-huh.
hurting others comes out of their own disconnect and pain. And so we're born worthy. We are created worthy. We are and in the church I grew up in, there was a prayer that said, I am not worthy to gather the crumbs under your table. So we're taught a lot that. But not everybody takes it as personally or as I did. I mean, you know what I mean? There's people that can go up in that same religion and not maybe feel that way in certain aspects. But what I've learned is if you don't feel worthy, you can't serve at the level you're meant to. You can't live the life that you're meant to live. You have to own your worthiness to show up, to believe. But you showing up when we don't show up in our worthiness, this is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it. If I don't show up 100% believing in me and being the best me that I can be, then the gift that I came here with, that I'm meant to share with others, can go to the grave never being given to others. Every
Mm.
single one of us, I love this. I heard this the other day. You are one of one. Every
Oh.
single human being is one of one. Every single human being has gifts and talents. And our journey through life gives us more gifts and talents. Your purpose can change based on your journey. And sometimes people have the same purpose. They came here knowing their purpose. and they are living it, like there's a little young boy, what is he, like 9 now, that's like already a designer because his parents let him follow his dream, and he's made, I mean, it's crazy and awesome because they didn't put him in the box that everybody puts people in that makes us lose track of, we don't have any idea who we are anymore because everybody goes to school, everybody has to do this, everybody tells you who you're supposed to be at 7 or 8 or 9, instead of letting you be whoever you show up as. Right? And after a while, we don't know who we are anymore. And we got to be willing to open up and decide that we want to figure that out. And we want to let go of everybody else's expectations and just line up with who we are. And it does take showing up for yourself to do that. Somewhere along the way, you have to decide, I decided I didn't want to go bankrupt, which was not necessarily owning my worthiness. It was just, I don't want to do this to other people. And then out of that, in order to do that, I had to start owning some worthiness, right? Some worthiness to get solutions, some worthiness to show up for yourself. And then it was like, when I got almost out of debt in a year, oh, wow, what can I actually do?
Yeah.
I can create
Look
$1
at
million
everything.
business. Oh, I can come up with the money in a very short amount of time to buy my house while still being ethical in every single way in what I'm doing, right? It's not a straight path. It's not always easy. It's just a matter of what's the next step and how can I make this more fun? And what I know is if it's ever feeling heavy, if I'm not feeling good, I'm holding back whatever's supposed to be coming to me. I'm disconnected when I don't feel good. And I got to get back to that space of loving where I'm at, figuring it out, jumping into scary places sometimes to make my dreams come true and be the person that I know I'm called to be, that I'm meant to be, that that I get to be.
We're going to get into your business and like how people can reach out to you because you help people discover this and move through these phase changes in their life and know how to do your framework. We're going to share all your contact info and where people can reach you. I'd love to hear about the new book that's coming out. Before we get into that stuff, what else is there that we haven't talked about today that you wish we had?
Maybe it's a good to take a moment and say, because people might look and go, well, you're way up here. How can you help me? I'm here. Well, one, I've been there, right? In the lowest of the low and the bottomest of the pits. But also, it's okay to say, just recently. So when I sold my practice, I started out doing some relief work part-time while I was working on this. And I loved, I did ER medicine full-time before I opened my practice, but I had my practice for 22 years. ER's changed. Well, I wanted to give it a go. So I went to an ER practice that one of my friends owned, and another person that I worked with for a long time was medical director. And I only worked swing shifts, so I was always working with another doctor, and then, but I had to keep taking the courage and believing in myself to okay, I've done these surgeries, I'm here, I can do an overnight. I noticed, oh, this person's doing an overnight. I know I'm just as capable as that, so I have to be willing to sign up for it, and then I go and start working at other places, and then I keep stretching yourself, It surprised me at first. So what I'm saying is I still didn't totally see how good I am and that I'm always reaching and learning and that there's so much more that people are looking for than you realize, when I
like
actually
you've done all this progress and yet you were still in a situation where you didn't quite
you can
see
doubt yourself. Yeah. So what I want to say is I don't think that ever totally goes away because every next space, even in the new industry, every time you get a new, bigger audience, that's scary. Every time you get a new opportunity, that's scary. Learn to talk to yourself in a way that allows you to grow and learn that if something, I can't tell you how many no's I did to myself before I realized, and I see people do it to themselves all the time. If an opportunity comes your way, you're ready for it. Now you just have to take that leap of faith. That doesn't mean you don't have to prepare.
Right.
When I say that, I'm not saying, oh, you just skippy show up without getting ready for it, right?
Yes.
But when that opportunity comes to speak on a bigger stage, you say yes, and then you practice. What I've noticed too is every time I have a new workshop or something different, it turns out to be something that I needed to hear. I needed to remind myself, something that resonates within, and I walk away with just as much as what I'm able to give.
This reminds me of imposter syndrome, which I would like to reframe to growth syndrome.
Yes.
I think a big misconception is that like we're going to get comfortable at some point and not feel uncomfortable or that we're like unsure. And if you don't feel that way, you're not growing and
Yes.
you're complacent. And so
Yes.
the feeling,
Well, and if you're
although
not growing, you're dying.
yes. And although that feeling is scary and uncomfortable, we have been trained, I think, in veterinary medicine specifically, that it's a negative. Like imposter syndrome is something we should be ashamed that we're feeling or like be scared of or prepare for, that we're going to endure that. And it's like, it should be this thing that we embrace and are like, yes, like this means I'm in the right space and I'm excited, but it's uncomfortable and I'm, taking on this new thing. It's never going to be this easy step and we're never going to feel like we're 100% ready.
Exactly.
And so,
You
yes.
can't. 100%. And if you want to really get good, you have to get good at doing that. Right?
Yes.
Like I didn't have an ultrasound in my practice. I had almost everything else. And so then when I go out on relief, man, I just have to start learning. Get the probe on there, watch other people, learn how to do it. Do it. Quit being afraid of it because it's not that hard. And but again, you have to start doing it because at first you're afraid to do it because you think, well, I'm charging these people and well, yeah, there's somebody to back you up, so go for it,
Yes.
And make sure you have somebody to back you up, but you get the probe on there. You do the things. Same with the new surgery. To do ER medicine means you are going to do a surgery you haven't done in a while, and it's going to feel scary. Now, I don't mean do a surgery that's so far off mark you shouldn't be doing it. That's not.
Right.
No, one that stretches you, but you can do it as opposed to, but that's true in life.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right.
Yes.
I think unfortunately that term has come about and it cripples us. And honestly, that's the edge of where you want to be with the different word, right? Like, and then what you want to do is talk kind enough to yourself that you can trust yourself and go, even if you feel a little uncomfortable, because you're never going to succeed if you stay only feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
You can't get to the next level.
Yes. I feel like the sweet spot pro mode is like getting good at repeated pushing your comfortability boundary.
Yes.
Like if you can just get used to that, then you're unstoppable.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's huge. And also, sometimes you're going to have things not go your way, whatever it is. Take that as feedback. Look at it, see what you can learn from it, and then move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that.
Because there's no way that you can not have that happen, whether it's in veterinary medicine, whether it's in speaking, whether it's in anything. Nothing is a failure unless you don't learn from it and move on, unless you quit, whatever it is, and you're going to have surgeries that didn't go the way you wanted. You're going to have things happen that don't go the way you wanted. And of course, what you want to do is be super ethical about it,
Mm-hmm.
If something goes wrong in the practice, own it. If an animal got the wrong or whatever, own it and take care of it. So when you do that, you can live with yourself. Well, that's the same way you want to treat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Own it, figure it out, get all the solutions you can from it, and move on.
Yeah. Dr. Lucette, if somebody wants your help to apply the things that you have talked about today, where can they find you and your business? Tell me more about how people can reach out to you.
So they can find me at drlucette.net, and my email address is drlucette@drlucette.net, and they're always welcome to reach out by email if they just have questions. I'm always happy to jump on like a Zoom call, like a coffee chat, and just kind of get to know them and see, what questions they may have. I do have some free resources on my website as well that they're more than welcome to hop through. They can also find me on social media, and we're working on, it's always like juggling all the different things, more content. I have a TikTok and I have a lot of videos on there, but we haven't put it, like I'm working on putting more out because there's always different growth phases. But I like to have little quick things that they can go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
You
so
have a
I'm
lot
trying
of
to do
really
that on
great
Instagram.
free materials for people to use to help get them started. I've noticed that on your social media platforms. I think there's something really powerful to this idea of like, if you find yourself hitting something constantly or regularly, stopping for a second to think about, this doesn't need to be the norm. I don't need to get angry at the traffic every single day. And just the next thought, trying to get yourself to a point where you can be like, okay, how do we change this plan? Like, how do we make this process
what can I do?
different?
Because I don't, it's toxic positivity if you think you're going to do the same thing you're doing right now, but la through it, right?
Yes.
Because you already have, that repetitive thought is too strong. So you have to make decision. I'm going to do this. And if that doesn't work, okay, it doesn't mean nothing works. It means that didn't work. So if music doesn't help, try audiobooks that you're really into and making sure you leave early enough that you're not so stressed when you're in traffic.
Right.
You know it's going to take that long. And not letting yourself, I mean, I've seen people make decisions that weren't in their best interest, like moving off of, because I live on a highway that's been under construction for a bit. You know, when interest rates are high and the cost of the houses is high, determined to move because they hate 380 traffic. And financially, it wasn't necessarily the greatest decision. When we can also tell and for some people, it is the right decision, but I'm just saying we want to make decisions from a place of not being aggravated.
Right.
We don't want our emotions to be what's driving the decision, right? In anything, really, because even in changing relationships or, you know, if you have a friend that you're like, okay, I might need a little more distance from, we don't want to make that decision.
In the heat of the frustration. I see what you're saying.
You might make a decision in that moment that maybe you need to step back a little bit so you can evaluate from a better space and then see how you feel and what's, you know, because you have to own your part of it before you can decide on a decision. Am I getting mad and I could actually not get mad if I just allowed that was her and I don't have any responsibility for that? And then is that a space where we can actually enjoy each other? Or is this person really exhausting? And one of the reasons I'm getting frustrated is because they don't want to feel any better. And if that's the case, then you probably need to love them from a little further distance, right? Let them be in that space. They got to find their way. But you're not helping them when they drag you down into misery too. And you're certainly not helping yourself either.
And I think we put up with a lot as veterinary professionals. I think we do this with clients where we tolerate behavior past a point. And I'm lucky enough to have started after I graduated in practice where like boundaries were communicated well and I had the autonomy to say I wasn't going to tolerate certain behaviors, and we got rid of people who were negative in the clinic, like employee-wise and team member-wise. But not everybody starts that way.
And there's a lot of veterinary professionals that don't honor those boundaries, and I think it's epic in our, just because of, again, what we talked about as far as the personalities that are attracted to our profession. Because I worked with veterinarians who didn't set those boundaries. I set those boundaries in my practice, not just with team members, but with clients. There wasn't very many that I had to fire, but there were some.
Yeah.
And
we did a whole episode on firing clients because I feel like I know that is not a norm in the industry to choose to fire a client versus bend over backwards and cater towards them so you don't get a bad review.
What it does to our team.
Yeah.
And over time, if you allow clients to run all over your team, the best team members will leave, and they should.
They will.
Because then you're not giving them respect.
Yes. Yes.
And in general, when I fired a client, it was over the way they treated the team, because most of the time they didn't talk to the doctor the way they talked to the team.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Lucette, I could talk to you forever. We could do this for 8 hours. Thank you so much for your time today. I feel like I have gained so much from this conversation that we've had, and I know our listeners will feel the same. You are impacting so many people with the work that you're putting out. And so I just want to say thank you for what you're doing and the mission that you're on. We need it in our industry, and so many people need to hear this message. I really appreciate you coming on this podcast and sharing your story and being so vulnerable with me about the things you've been through. Yeah, I just can't say thank you enough for this time.
I appreciate you. I love what you're doing for the veterinary industry. You're a bright light. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to put all your info and your website in the show notes. And if there's any other tools that we want to put in there, but definitely we'll direct them to your resources. And I hope I talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to Choose People Love Pets. If this episode resonated with you, please follow or subscribe to support the show. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, we hope you'll share it with them. Thanks for being here. This is Choose People Love Pets.